Morning, guys. How are we doing today? It's a Sunday morning, and we're going to cover a couple of records today that are near and dear to my heart. One is pretty ubiquitous, Cannonball's Something Else, and the other is one of my great jazz record collecting stories. First, I want to address a couple things. For the most part, social commentary, my point of views, my philosophy. I've always been a part of this channel and always will be. And I feel like probably 90% of people on the channel agree with what I have to say, or at least find it interesting and have some introspection from it. There's a few people that rubs wrong, and they often get indignant and leave, and I'm okay with that. See ya. One of the things I want to address real quick is what is the next step for us as a society, as a civilization. And there's a return to nationalism that I think is foolhardy, especially in the days of globalization, and multinational corporations ain't going anywhere. And if we return to a system governed and look internally to just smaller national departments, we will lose any regulation over those larger entities. And globalization is a fact, and it's a part of the new landscape. The nation state is an antiquated, outmoded form of governance. The belief in the nation state and the ideology behind it are outdated, outmoded. They don't define who we think we are. Nations are such temporal creations. They've existed for a few centuries at best. And so our own family tree lineage migration usually outlives any of our national allegiances. Nations should be something you cheer for at the Olympics. And even then, it's such a temporal... I've studied geography my whole life. I'm a huge fan of nations and geography, to the point where I kind of saw through the subject. When you cross a border from Libya into Algeria, I got the world tattooed on my arm. When you cross that border, the language doesn't change. The culture doesn't change. The religion doesn't change. The desert doesn't change. The things that we think nations define, and when most people are like, define what being such and such a nation, a national means, it doesn't define culture. When you cross those borders, those things don't change instantly. Look at like a place like Switzerland. It's got a big chunk of Italian speakers, a big chunk of German, a big chunk of French. The lines are blurred. When you take a map of the world's religions, or the world's languages, or the world's race, and try to apply them to the continents, none of those things define nations. And what nations end up defining at the end of the day, when you cross that border from one nation into the other, they define economics. Currency is what changes. The price of a tank of gasoline is what changes. That makes them, a poor definition of who I am. B, something I'm not willing to die for, fight for, or live my life for. And C, I need to recognize at some point that the elite have once again found a tool to divide us. And on some level, the elite have recognized they can use nation like they've used religion, like they've used race. And you create these fundamental right-wing nationalist movements on these false ideologies of this is my identity, this is who I am, I'll fight and die for this stuff. It's a return to an outmoded form of seeing the world. But B, it does what they always intend for everything that they do to us. It makes us less powerful to have any say on what they do. And so the elite are always going to encourage religious divide, racial divide. And now nation and a return to nationalism is one more way they can isolate us And so that we don't have any unified power as people. And so I'm speaking very much in broad strokes and very much in a sense of, in an ideological world, how do we move forward? And it's not by returning to nation, because even if we want to, we're not going to get the worm back in the can. The global economics are a factor. They are going to be that. They're not going to return to being these regional industries that they once were. And government could then have a say on a regional industry that was kind of confined to the borders that they existed within. These borderless economic entities, of course they want us to all see nation, 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 because as that small governing body, at best, we can regulate and have a say over that small region, thereby leaving the rest of the world to still do our bidding and do as we see fit. And oftentimes the power of government isn't strong enough to really stem the tide of what industry is trying to do. Do you really think the governments of Liberia and Sierra Leone and Kenya and Tanzania have the power to change what the remnants of the colonial corporations and the large industries today that are still robbing Africa of its resources? When you're given the chance to govern Uganda, you're not given the wealth of Uganda, you're given the problems. And say, go ahead, try to manage it. And if you don't interfere with our economics, we'll actually let you make a decent living while you try to intermingle with your people and solve those tribal, local issues. But if you try to represent those people and try to make something better for them and try to expel corporate interests, boy, your time in leadership will not be long. And so, again, I'm not going to go on forever here, but what is an ideological solution? And it's a form of global populist government of the people. And I'm not talking the UN, I'm not talking a League of Nations type, man. I'm talking about a consensus among the world's citizenry of what we deem acceptable. And I want to drive home the only thing the elite fear is us being intellectual, compassionate, and empathetic enough that we have a global shared understanding of our place on this planet. And if we deem your business practices, your child labor, your environmental degradation, your toppling of regimes, anything, if you're doing something that we as a global human citizenry don't think is commendable, we have the power to boycott your product. That's the only form of power we have. And so it's not enough for a nation to say, we won't support this industry, we won't support this company because of its practices, because of its environmental regulation. We need to have a global consensus among the world's people, which requires unity, communication, and trust, and a forward-thinking, our planet traveling through space mentality, where we can say, you know what, that industry does not deserve our efforts, dollars, time. And if we boycott it as a planet, as a people, and say we will not buy those products, we will not trade with those companies, we will not endorse what they do, they can be unregulated by government because no government's there to regulate them. They're global. So no nation can dictate to them. But as consumers, we can. But we're so divided that at best, a small percentage of the world's people sees it and says we're not going to support it, but the rest of us are so busy infighting over all the other stupid religion, economics, politics, race, that we don't have time to recognize what the large issues are. And so we're hung up on all these social issues that are all the territory of the small mind. The uneducated mind sits around debating race and religion and nation and all the abortion. We should be talking about our planet's survival. And are they going to destroy our water? Are they going to destroy our air? That's what we all should be focused on. How do we return to a more sustainable agrarian society where there's resources that are distributed for everyone, healthcare, clean water, good education systems. If we had that type of focus, and I didn't see Mexicans and blacks and Russians and Chinese as my enemy, but I saw them as my ally. Because once we recognize that we share a common agenda, and we can say across borders, across religions, across race, you know what? That company doesn't deserve our consumption. It's that the elite would fear and would go great lengths to prevent us from ever happening. And so when some national movement happens in Europe and there's some far right-wing agenda to move back to Brexit, for example, you're not changing the global economics. You're changing your power to govern global economics. You've made your own reach diminished. Part of Trump's issues here is that he's trying to go back to America First mentality, which is against some of the global agenda. And he's probably disturbed some apple carts that most American presidents would never even nudge. And I would never, ever side with him or defend him. I think he's a horrible, immoral human being. But I still think he's done things to help him and his friends in a nationalistic sense. And created trade embargoes and done things that have isolated in an attempt to move back to a nationalist kind of viewpoint. But again, it doesn't benefit the American people. It benefits that upper 1%. And so that's, again, sometimes when you talk about the world's problems, you need to present a solution once in a while. And it's an idealistic solution, and we're probably generations away from it. But we got two possible futures: Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek or George Lucas's Star Wars. And as things going, Death Stars are in our future, not interplanetary exploration by a united human front. We're a long way from that type of democratic, socialist, interwoven fabric of a society where race and gender and religion has zero bearing on my love and affection for another human being. And if they could make us more divided with nations, which once were governing bodies that divided the 20th century world, but in the 21st century, it's a new economics that exists. Governments and nationalities are outmoded, powerless structures. And in baseball, there's many tiers of baseball. There's in soccer in a lot of countries as well, football. Imagine a minor league or a diminished tier of a football league trying to make a call in the Premier League. The Premier League will down like, you can't tell me what to do. You're a minor league umpire. You're a minor league referee. You have no power to tell me what to do. At best, you can govern my actions within your league, which is a small percent of my business interest. So again, an ideology, it's a difficult thing to implicate, and we can't really just have a global government because it would be subverted. What we need to have is a global consensus and work together. Seems impossible, but I think it's doable if we stop the infighting, if we stop the division. I'm going to move on, go back to jazz, but I'm not going to make every episode some social political diatribe. I'm not. But there's times where it becomes a forefront issue, and with the elections right now in America, things are crazy. And they have been this entire year. And there's no question in my mind that a lot of what's happened, from the riots and the protests to even the reaction and treatment of COVID and the hype and the fear in this country, it's all been done to create a climate of fear. And people who are afraid never demand anything more than please keep me safe. That's how empires behave, and they're doing exactly what they should be doing. It's up to us in the modern world to have a broader scope in our understanding. People 5 centuries ago didn't know what lay beyond that ocean, that hill, that river, that valley. We now know our world from space. We see how interconnected we are, our migration, our genealogy. We're one people. I got this one guy, Mike Tomlin, keeps trying to tell me racism is not a real thing. I understand that, but it's still part of the constructs of the world we live in. I can't do the disservice of ignoring the racial tension, how they manipulate race by saying race isn't real. it might not be real. We might be one genetic people. And I completely understand it and agree with you. It doesn't change that it's being used as a construct to divide us. And it doesn't change the fact that they're using race and Black Lives Matter even to further isolate and divide people in this country. And a lot of people who would be neutral and not have an opinion on black issues are suddenly forced with things like the Black Lives Matter and how it's being publicized and what agenda is being attached to it. It went from a roots kind of underground movement to this broad stroke global construct that's artificial now. And it's designed to polarize. And if you're not with Black Lives Matter, if you are, you're anti-cop. And so the average rural American has to make a choice. Am I pro-black or am I pro-cop? I don't know any black people. I don't really trust the police, or maybe I do. They're usually the good guys in the movies and on the TV. I guess I'm going to side with the cops. And that divide is the construct that's always being created artificially to keep us from having consensus, unity. Cannonball Adderley, one of my favorite players of all time. He's a giant. He's one of the great alto players to ever play. He's a very expressive, jubilant player. He dances and plays his way through a lot of his albums and songs. He just seems to have a lot of fun. Of course, his brother Nat Adderley is at his side on a lot of his recordings. They're both from the Florida area, and of course migrated north to Chicago, did some great stuff at the MRC label, and then they moved Savoy first, then MRC. Then they both moved to Riverside. In 1958, Cannonball knocks out one great album for Blue Note as a leader, and this is during his time playing with Miles Davis, and so he brings over Miles on this record, and for all intents and purposes, it's a Miles Davis-led session. He's a very dominant force on the record, and if for my money, it's a top 5 Miles Davis session. It's funny to say one of my favorite Miles Davis records is actually a Cannonball Adderley titled record, but it really is. Of course, we're talking about Something Else, Blue Note 1595. It's just a beautiful, beautiful record with a ton of groove, a ton of feel. The rhythm section of Sam Jones, Hank Jones, not related by the way, and Art Blakey are just incredible. Miles' balladeering is always absolutely wonderful. Cannonball and Miles have a nice simpatico. Cannonball's bright and spry and darts to and fro, and Miles is kind of minimal and somber. And again, that polarity between the bright and the dark always has a magnetism, always has a power. This wonderful track here that ends the side of the record, Dancing in the Dark, is just beautiful. It's a super simple Reed Miles album cover. An often bit album cover. I've seen this done by people quite a lot. It's been reissued quite a lot in a lot of different formats. I'm not one of those reissue guys who says you have to have this version or that version. Just get the music, however you can afford it. And I'd rather you have a shitty copy on vinyl that sounds just fine than stream it and not really connect with it, not have the liner notes, not have it in your hand. You feel things differently when it's in your hand. Sam Jones is one of the great Riverside bass players. He's mostly a Riverside guy, so you don't see him on Blue Note a ton. He does do a few things. Hank Jones goes back to Savoy, one of the great Detroit Jones brothers, along with Thad and Elvin. Hank Jones is one of the greatest piano players that most people aren't that aware of. He should be much higher in the jazz constellations. He should be up there with the Miles Davises and the Charles Mingus's and all these great elevated names. Hank Jones is not in that firmament, and he should be. He's absolutely a brilliant player that has roots in the swing era, but he's really always been a bebop, post-bop, modern player. His early stuff for Norman Granz is wonderful and expensive. His recordings on Savoy with Donald Byrd and Kenny Clark are great. He makes 5 records for Savoy that are just beautiful. And of course, he makes a lot of other records going into the 90s, I believe. Lived a long time in his later years, he became recognized by a lot of the guilds as one of the true legends. But the modern day collector hasn't quite grasped it yet, how important he is, how beautiful a player he is. Cannonball's killing that solo on this right here. It's a record I've had on CD as well for a long time, so I played it in my car a lot. And there's not a lot of jazz records I probably know as well as I know this one. Side 2 was wonderful. One for Daddy-O was great. Who Daddy-O, of course, was that Chicago DJ who helped produce some records for Argo and was a great personality and helped them sign some great young talent. And the 5 Daddy-O records at Argo are all outstanding records worth looking for. And of course, Cannonball Adderley has that role somewhat with Riverside, where he brings a lot of great sessions to Riverside as Cannonball Adderley presents. And those are all worthwhile records. This version of Autumn Leaves is kind of where the fame for this record is really built. Love for Sale is also outstanding on side 1. But this version of Autumn Leaves, it's just gorgeous. And Miles is in rare form here. He almost seems to be less tense than he often is. And I think he's often a very agitated character. And I think once he goes to Columbia, there also becomes a great deal of stress, trying to produce records that will sell to justify his contract, to hope another contract's going to come. And so actually working under another person's name here for Blue Note, a label that he did some recordings for early in the 50s, but he's not a Blue Note artist. And so being here under Cannonball Adderley's name, suddenly there's not that pressure to be successful, sell records. Do I need to make a compromise here to make this a little more accessible? Do I need to choose a couple songs that the white audiences will buy more? Because Columbia's expecting me to sell 500,000 copies of this. It's, as a DJ, I can tell you myself, when I have a residency somewhere and they're paying me $50, they're not expecting me to do much more than just play music. But if they're paying me $500, they're expecting me to put bodies in the seats. So the more of a contract you have, the more expectation you have, the more pressure is on you. And it's actually not fun getting paid really well to do a gig somewhere where no one's coming. Because you just feel uptight the whole time, like, man, they're going to fire me tonight. They're paying me way too much to have 12 people show up. And you're hoping that when you start somewhere as a resident DJ, you can bring that audience in and justify them paying you that. And I'm not going to take a gig nowadays for $50. Although I haven't done a gig now in like 7 months, which it's garbage. I miss entertaining people with music. I love it. It's a lot of fun to create the background setting for your entertainment, for your vibe, for your atmosphere. That's what I do well. I'm like, oh, I see the element that's in the room. It's kind of young. Let's do this. Oh, it's kind of older. It's kind of, I can match it. I can find that right color and put that pastiche out there. But I think Miles is in a place where there's no pressure here. Blue Note's expectations aren't going to be this guy. You know, he doesn't have to sell 1 million copies of this to be deemed successful. Cannonball's technically the leader of the session, even though we all know Miles he brought the songs in the charts, and Miles was very much the construct of the session. But Blakey just lays down what Blakey does. Hank is just absolutely beautiful. And there's an outro in this where Hank Jones shows you what Hank Jones is about. That's just gorgeous. And Cannonball, like I said, he's kind of a light, easygoing fella. And Coltrane's a heavy cat. So just working with Coltrane, there's a no-nonsense kind of sensibility to working with John that I think Miles' dark, moody, brooding personality often felt challenged by John. And I imagine there's times when they didn't speak much in the studio. You know, they didn't speak much when they were on tour together. They're just such different places. John's very serious and on a mission, and Miles is very melancholy and somber and wants you to be paying homage to him. And Coltrane doesn't. He's thinking about nothing but his quest. Cannonball, on the other hand, is kind of a light spirit. He's fun. he's ebullient, and he's probably put everybody at ease. And it's a very comfortable, joyful sounding. The music just flows. It just has this beautiful effortlessness to it that a lot of the greatest jazz records to me are exactly that. They're effortless. There's a comfort, there's a communication, there's a simpatico where we're all on the same page. We're not pushing each other aside for the spotlight, we're sharing it. And to me, this is one of the perfect records of the Blue Note canon and the jazz canon. It's just a beautiful record. And it should be in every jazz collection. And it should be one of the first jazz records that a non-jazz fan looks for. It's a true groove blues-based, very black in its essence. You know, it's not Sketches of Spain. This is the black music experience of the blues and space and groove. It's a 10 out of 10. It's a 5-star record. It's absolutely wonderful. And it's nice to hear Miles taking a deep breath and relaxing a little bit. It's not something we get to hear a lot of. You know, just a real contentment. And you can really feel Miles' state of mind from one record to the next. You know, depending on the stressors, depending on his life's chapters, where they're at, addiction, women, his relationship with his dad. There's a lot of things that affect Miles, and it really comes across in his music and his playing, and it's really transparent in a lot of ways. And it doesn't seem like he has a lot of fun in a lot of his career. His insecurity, his constant struggle with identity and direction and being cutting edge. It's a lot of work trying to always appear like you are leading the charge. And at times he was in the front lines, but a lot of times he's just kind of in the second or third rank following along, but his popularity makes it seem like today he was leading the charge. This is one of my favorite Miles records. It's a beautiful session where Miles is in his element, and it's a record I wish we had more of from him. I wish he had been a sideman on 5 more Blue Note records. They would all be classics, and we'd all hear Miles in a setting that we don't get to hear him in enough. And his earlier recordings where he was a sideman, he's still a guy very much struggling to find his sound. He was never a bebop player, even in the bebop setting. In the early 50s, he's kind of making his way, but he's still kind of adapting his sound. He's somewhere between playing up-tempo and playing mid-tempo and ballads. And by now he's got this muted horn harmon thing going on. He knows how his sound is by 1958. And so we just hear him and Cannonball, who have a great comfort with each other already. Listen to Hank. It's so wonderful. It's a perfect record. You know, it's just a perfect record. And then I'm going to give you a bit of Love for Sale. It shuffles along just fantastically. A great track. I believe it's Cole Porter's song. Now we're going to change gears here. I'm missing a needle right now. This needle here is really weak and wobbly. I got new ones coming in the mail, but they should have been here by this weekend and they haven't shown up yet. So now we're going to talk about a different record. And it's a record I talked about not too long ago because I found an imported copy from somewhere in Europe. I think it was Sweden. But I had Discogs set so that if one of these showed up for sale, it would alert me. And I'm an obsessive compulsive guy. I must have searched for this record on Amazon, eBay, Discogs 1,000 times over the last 3-4 years. It's Argo number 604, making it the 4th release in the Argo canon. And those of you who know me, I try to get all the early releases by all these jazz labels, trying to get where they kind of fit in, where they come in what their sound was, their identity, who they had in their roster at that point, and then watch the progression of that label's movements within the jazz canon. And so I always wanted to have the early recordings, and this is an Argo I just couldn't find. It's super rare. Pinky Winters. And then when I got the imported version, I fell in love with the music. It was much better than I thought it was going to be. Some white singer from Chicago. I thought it was going to be good, but it's great. It's absolutely great. And so I kept hoping that I would still find an original someday. And one had showed up finally. After the first 3 or 4 years of looking for this, I couldn't find a single copy on vinyl of an original pressing. There was some coming out of Japan with the alternate cover, and they wanted $80, $100 plus shipping for what's a reissue. And I'm not going to fork out $100 very often for an original, let alone a reissue. That's just not how I operate. There's too many other records I want to find and buy, and I wait for the cosmic clouds to separate and part and things to kind of fall in my lap in a kind of dreamy kind of setting. Anyway, 2 weeks ago, Discogs alerts me that, hey, there's a copy of Pinky Winters available. So I went and looked, and true enough, it's not an import. It's an original Argo pressing of 604. And I was like, oh my God. And the price was not that unreasonable. And I looked at the grading, and it was graded at good, and the cover was good plus, and it says it was incredibly scuffed and scratched. And I showed my friend Scott Baldwin how the listing was. It basically made it sound like the record was unplayable. And I was like, man, I still would like to have the original cover just to put it in that Argo discography. I'm making an offer to the guy. So I reached out and said, hey, can I give you $70 for it, including shipping? And they were super willing to do that. They're like, yeah, we'll give you that. That's fine. That's fair. And so then I had a week of apprehension waiting for it to show up. Did I just buy a $70 dog turd that the record was going to be embarrassing to even show? Or is this record going to be at least playable with some skips, hicks, and pops? That was the best case scenario. It was going to be playable with some skips and hicks and crackles. And I'd probably listen to the imported version I got with the other cover and just have the cover for $70, which is kind of a waste of money in a way. And, you know, I'm obsessive compulsive. I like to have the original thing, but I'm not gonna go broke doing it. So I was holding my breath. It showed up 2 days ago, and if you're listening, the vinyl's silent. It came from a record store. I was actually in it in Chicago a couple years ago looking for this record because it's a Chicago label. I'm like, have you seen this Pinky Winters? They had never heard of it. And so I found it on their site through Discogs, and whoever graded it must have been some new kid that didn't know how to grade records very well. There's some minor paper scuffs. But listen how soft this is. You would hear the snap, crackle, pop of the Rice Krispie bar if this record was dirty. It's not. I let out this euphoric and I opened it up upstairs. My kids thought I was having a stroke. They're like, are you okay, Dad? I'm like, oh, I'm good. And I every time I look, I was like, yeah, I haven't even put it on yet. But just looking at the record, it was clean. And it's probably like my greatest moment as a collector. I got this record I've been searching, this holy grail that I've been searching for years. And now that I get it with the original cover, I got it at a great price. And it's probably worth 10 times what I paid. And that's not really what I care about. My wife cares more, but I spent $70, and it's probably worth at least $700, if not $1,400. But there's a version right now for sale out of Japan on eBay, and they want $1,900 for it. And it's in less of a condition than this one. And if you look on the various Pop Psych and record sale chart things, the record always goes for $1,000, $800, $1,200, $1,500. It's a very expensive, very rare record. And I just feel like the cosmos blessed me and gave me this holy grail records I've been looking for so long. And it's not just rare, it's awesome. Her voice is wonderful with a great blues heft to it. The musicians are fantastic. I believe Chico Hamilton's on this, Gerald Wiggins is on the piano, Howard Roberts is playing the guitar with Jim Wolfe. And I love Howard Roberts' guitar playing on this. It's beautiful. Beautiful old Argo Chicago jazz. You can even tell it's original because the only two records they're showing are two of the titles that came out before this. So there's a little tape on it, but like I said, I was like, I was so excited. I was just ecstatic, and my kids thought I was having a stroke. They're like, Dad, are you dying? What's going on up there? And then I came down and I just looked at the vinyl, and it was so clean. And I came down and listened to it, and beyond my wildest dreams, it sounds so great. And so it's the greatest mistake ever made in my favor. And when you buy something that's good, you're always taking a crapshoot, because one definition from one seller of what a good is to another seller will never be, it's not going to be the same. But it's got the great Argo logo, with the little ship, the boat. Of course, Argo is a reference to 10,000 Leagues on the Sea, isn't it? With the Greek ship. But the vinyl, like I said, is just immaculate. The music's wonderful. It's 3 a.m. music. And I've listened to it probably 3 times already. And I just got the other one from Spain, the Spanish pressing from Sweden 2 months ago. I probably listened to that one 5 times already. So I'm pretty familiar with the record already. But just an ecstatic moment for me. I wanted to share it with you all. What's your Holy Grail? And have you found it? And for me now, I don't even know what my next Holy Grail is going to be. I have so much of the discography is complete. A lot of the things I'm looking for are very small pieces. An idea I have for an upcoming series is label photo albums, where we talk about the Savoy photo album and we look at the discography of the records and talk about the few pieces I'm missing, label by label. And maybe people can help me even find some of the pieces I'm missing. I'm obsessive compulsive. Obviously, it's part of where my knowledge base comes from. Is I like to know my subject matter, and part of knowing it is having the pieces. I was just as bad collecting baseball and hockey cards as a kid. I had to have thousands of cards to know what I was talking about. I'm not the kind of guy who wants to talk about much about things he doesn't have much insight into. And there's probably some people out there going, well, you're sure talking a lot about social issues and politics a lot. But I've spent my whole life studying geography and history. And there's nothing more terrifying than looking at the study of the world and the history and how things operate economically and who's oppressed and who's held down. And as you get older, being able to see it in the present crystal clear. Crystal clear. There's nothing obfuscating what I'm seeing. I can see how the machine operates. And it's just got us so divided. And jazz is such a part of that social maneuvering. It was a people finding solace. And if you're some conservative guy who just sits back and listens to jazz because it makes me sophisticated while I drink my wine, they're great players, aren't they? No. It's a great sorrow that comes from a great tyranny that fuels that art. And you can't listen to it and not think about slavery and the awful things that these people went through to make that beautiful art. And if you can listen to it without hearing that, it's akin to reading the Old Testament and not recognizing the children of Israel went through some shit. And the children of Israel were far more militant, violent people. They went into Canaan and they slaughtered everything. The blacks in America just were at the butt of the gun, the end of the noose, for 400 years. This music was a balm and a medication for that. And you can't listen to it without hearing its connection to where it's coming from. And shame on you if you try to. Shame on you if you think it's just about the sophisticated chord structures and the wonderful... No, it's not. It comes from the blues. It's a people saying, I can't take the stress in my life today. Let me pick up this horn and vacate some of that desperation. Let me dispense of some of my anxiety. Let me find some joy in all this pain. And if you don't hear that, and if you're not trying to feel what that's saying to you, you're not a jazz fan. You're a poser, posturing with your little sophisticated group, drinking your wine, going, I like jazz because it makes me feel like I'm knowledgeable and superior to people. Not what this music was ever about. Ever. And it's certainly been put in that setting now. You hear it in the museums, you hear it in the sophisticated lounges, and I think everybody kind of has that notion at one point that, oh, this makes me sophisticated. But it was never about, look how sophisticated I am. It's the human condition expressing joy in spite of sorrow. It's beauty in spite of the ugly. That's what we need to feel. That's what we need to hear. And we need to be compulsive in how we hear. We need to be obsessed with understanding. This music is a medication. And it applies to the present in so many ways. And it speaks for those without a voice still today. It's one of the most impressive art forms that's ever been invented on this planet. Not because of its sophistication and its arrangement and its intellect, but because of how directly it emotes my condition. How I feel right now can be captured for posterity's sake, and I can get that off of my chest with no limitations, with no governance. I'm not looking for the rules of music to break and redefine them. I'm just using simple melodic structures to express my happiness and joy in spite of what's been done to me. May I lift up my arms and my hands and find a moment of praise, a moment of thanks, a moment of joy. I'm still alive. They haven't killed me yet. That's a win. And it's funny how the most depressed people actually end up finding more happiness. Less depression, less suicide. The people who live in poverty, they have so much more joy on their faces. Reading National Geographic as a kid, seeing some kid in Senegal with a soccer ball and a pair of Adidas, kicking it, happiest kid in the world. Then you see some kid in Pittsburgh whose dad's in a coal mine, and he's just like... They never showed happy kids in America in National Geographic as a kid. Never. It was always the somber, the depressed, the sad sacks. But you would be in Africa and you would see nothing but a bunch of kids smiling. We got our goats, we got our chickens, we got our well, we got our garden, we own our property. You know what I mean? This land our families live on for generations until some bank comes along and tries to take it from them. That's what freedom looks like. Not working 12 hours a day and being behind in all your payments. Freedom looks like I own my land, I own my water source, my food is supplied to me. What do I need currency for? I make $200 American dollars a year. I got my clock radio, I can hear my soccer games. I got my pair of soccer shoes and a soccer ball. Let's go play. We'll have a fire later, go down the river, look at the stars, catch some fish. That's freedom. The freedom that we fight for, it's a deception. It's a deception. Anyway, Pinky Winters, one of my happiest moments as a collector. Just fantastic. What a thank you to the creator, the cosmic energy, whatever it is. Thank you for recognizing me and appreciating me and dropping that in my lap. It's a wonderful piece that I will cherish. And the Miles Davis Cannonball Adderley record should be in every collection. Good luck finding the Pinky Winters. You can find the Fresh Sounds Spanish version, but even those tend to go for way too much. You know, but you can probably stream it or download it or whatever. But the Miles is so worthwhile. I'm going to try not to talk about social issues and politics for the next couple episodes, just to kind of get us back on some kind of track here. And I want to dive into 1961 here really soon. We haven't been into that series for a while. But like I said, I've been working on my basement, taping and mudding and putting up walls. So I've been kind of exhausted and haven't had the same kind of energy to do long, in-depth episodes where I'm pulling out records and doing research and all that. But I think this week I'm going to have a little more time to do that. So hopefully 61 part 1 will come up next. If not, I'll maybe do one more 2x2, and then we'll start 61. We'll see how things go. Y'all be safe. Have a great Sunday. Be blessed. I think I'll even put a little thing in the... Oh, by the way, grab the t-shirts. They're great. Sven Van Hooydonk done a great job. Grab a t-shirt. Help promote the channel. Help support my family. They're wonderfully made, and I'm proud to offer them. And I think people should be enjoying wearing them. They're beautiful, beautiful garments. Y'all be safe. Peace.